Well, so thank you for being here. Thank you. This is the Exo Metaverse Hangout with Rey Hernandez. Rey is the director of the CCRI Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. We are going to be discussing his new book, A Greater Reality. So thank you all for being here. How this works is I will introduce the topic in this series. We'll have an interview and presentation with Rey. About 7 p.m. Pacific time, we will go into breakout rooms for small groups, or you're invited to do that. Those who want to stay and continue the discussion or hear the discussion with us can. It will be recorded, and so you're not going to miss anything. You can come back to it later. And at about 7:20 Pacific time, we will bring you back to the group from the breakout rooms for discussion and Q&A. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Rey, for being our guest. Thank you, Exo Metaverse members and volunteer team. If you're interested in joining and participating in Hangouts, you can learn more at exometaverse.org/join. A special thank you to our partner channels who are rebroadcasting this, New Realities and Portal to Ascension. If you are tuning in through those means, don't forget to like and subscribe. So thank you for exploring our greater reality together. This is part of what I'm calling the Extraordinary Stories mini-series. So Zenka, who is in Paris right now, invited me to interview in her stead over three of these sessions. So I decided to focus in on extraordinary stories. Last Hangout, we talked to Preston Dennett, who is a UFO researcher, and we talked about the stories that inspire. If you want to tune into that, you can join Exo Metaverse and look at it in the archives. Tonight is with Rey Hernandez discussing stories that become knowledge. So we will dive into Beyond UFOs and the Greater Reality. And then next Hangout, we are discussing stories that heal with Candace Craw-Goldman, who is the founder of the Beyond Quantum Healing methodology. And you might be familiar with Dolores Cannon's quantum healing and hypnosis technique. And so this is an iteration of that from one of her main students. So the goal of this mini-series is to educate people about respectful ways of relating to stories, to explore how personal stories can become collective intelligence, and to how can we use stories to raise consciousness and to make contact. And I'll just put a few inquiry questions out on the table. And Rey, we don't actually have to go point by point, but I'm just throwing these out on the table so they are in the space. Some of the inquiry might involve how best can we relate to another person's story, especially when it's hard to believe. How can we respect each other's story, especially when that story contradicts our own worldview? How can personal stories like ET contact or abduction tales become collective intelligence? And how can dreams and hypnotic stories contribute to that? And then finally, how can these stories serve as portals to a greater reality or to the higher self or a strange new world? I want to introduce myself. I am the technical co-founder of LightNet and Exo Metaverse. This is a citizen science platform related to consciousness. I'm also a hypnotist and dream worker through cosmicdreamsanctuary.org. And I'm the chief dream officer of Dreamwell, a mobile app dedicated to sleep, dream, and mindfulness. So you can see those at dreamwellbewell.com. I want to promote my self-published book, The Book of Galactic Light, which is the transcription of a rather strange and kind of all over the place inquiry, but it involves angel communication, channeling, CE5 style radio contact, and it is based on the work of the 15th century scholar and magician, Dr. John Dee. So for more information, you can go to cosmicdreamsanctuary.org/book. So Rey is the director of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. It is comprised of more than 25 PhD academics, medical doctors, researchers, whose mission is to explore a new paradigm of that seeks to integrate the findings of consciousness research and the phenomenology of extraordinary experiences. And Rey, in 2013, coined the term contact modalities. Here is a cover of the Beyond UFO book, which I really do appreciate. It is a very large statistical scientific study of more than 4,000 individuals who have responded to the survey who consciously remember contact with UFOs, UAPs, and other non-human intelligences. The follow-up book is The Greater Reality, which you can find information about on agreaterreality.com. The table of contents here he shared with me includes primacy of consciousness, non-local consciousness and telepathy, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams, which is the chapter he invited me to contribute. So thank you for that opportunity. Ghost spirits, spiritual transformation, entheogenic research, UFOs and UAPs, and talking about the future of study. So this is a rather large purvey of the field of contact modalities. So I'd love to just, before we go into the discussion, talk about the results of the survey that we offered. And we offered a survey about contact modalities. We asked you which of the following you experienced, and of our audience and those who responded, telepathy is number one. We've got dreams and lucid dreams, ET contact, UFO and UAP sightings, and astral projection, spirit visitation, out-of-body experience, remote viewing, and entheogenic experience. We asked you which you believe was primary, and most people said consciousness is, and just a few people said matter is primary. We also asked you if you had a contact experience, if it's been mostly positive, mostly negative, and everyone who has had a contact experience in our audience says it's mostly positive. And then nearly everyone says that they would invite an experience of a contact modality in their life. So with that, I'll invite Ray to share some stories and to speak a little bit about the Beyond UFO study. But yeah, Ray, I know you have some stuff prepared, and perhaps you could even just start by sharing the story of how you're here, of why you're working with Beyond UFOs, and the nature of perhaps the greater reality. Any stories around that?
Yeah. First of all, before March 4th, 2012, I was a total atheist. I was thought that everyone here in this meeting was a kook. I total materialist. Had gone to Berkeley for a PhD, Cornell for a master's, and I had been working for over 20 years as a tax attorney with the U.S. Department of Treasury. So I was all the way on the extreme of materialism as you can get. And then on that day, March the 4th, 2012, my wife and I had a joint experience in our living room where both of us saw an energy being, and this intelligence made my wife disappear, made my paralyzed dog disappear, who we were going to be euthanizing later that afternoon, and put me to sleep. And then totally controlled my consciousness, made me believe that I didn't care that I was watching this energy being in front of me, that my wife disappeared in front of me, the dog disappeared. I just didn't care, which is not logical, but that's exactly what happened. And then when I woke up about an hour later, my wife reappeared in front of me. She looked down. She saw the dog was running around the entire living room like she was a puppy. And she began screaming in Spanish, hallelujah, hallelujah, the angels cured her. The angels cured her. And the reason why she said that was because the previous night when we discovered that our beloved pet, Nena, which means little girl in Spanish, that she had become totally paralyzed. And then previous to that paralysis, she was like a gravely sick 90-year-old woman. She was taking many different medications. We were trying to give her a good quality of life in her last months of life. And so once she became totally paralyzed, my wife, who was a hardcore Catholic, began to pray all night. And so me, as a hardcore atheist materialist, I said, do all the praying you want, nothing's going to happen, you know. And so then this energy being, and let me describe it to you, what it looked like. It was roughly, let me go back, like 2.5 feet wide by 1.5 feet in height. Let me go a little bit, about 1.5 feet in height. And it was multiple colors fluctuating, like a desert mirage, pure energy. It was rectangular shape, but it didn't have any external edges because it was pure energy. And it was transparent. You could see the living room wall behind it and our sofa. It was floating 4 feet off the ground. And then, and I called it a being, an intelligence, because it controlled my thoughts, totally controlled my thoughts. And so after that experience, I found out my wife had missing time. I didn't know what that concept was. It wasn't until our third major contact experience that I had called MUFON because my wife began to pray at night and these huge UFOs would appear. And then on an August evening, I experimented calling down a UFO. And there was telepathic communication going on back and forth. I realized at that time that this was a holographic projection that I was seeing. Very detailed explanation to that. And again, projected thoughts, because how they got me to leave and my daughter and my 3 friends was I felt I was being attacked by hundreds of mosquitoes. And then later on, when I went inside, I'm telling my wife, my daughter goes to me, "Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside." And it's like a hypnotist snapped his finger. And like I woke up out of the trance and I realized that I was in some type of a trance. And so I ran downstairs, grabbed my camera and video recorder, ran outside. Nothing was there. And this was a huge object. It was the size of a small football stadium. But again, it was not material. It was composed, the first image was composed of hundreds of oblong streaks of light that were very, very long. And inside was all this white energy fluctuating. So then after my friends come and they're starting to try to explain this thing that they're watching, I began to laugh because I didn't tell them that I called it down. And by the way, I've done that 4 times and I stopped. And each time it's appeared within 15 minutes after I began calling it down. And these are huge objects that appear. And so, excuse me, after my friends began to try to explain this away, in my head, telepathically, I stated, "You better come up with some better," I used a 4-letter word, "some better 4-letter word than this that you're showing me, because what you're showing me is garbage, you know, and my friends don't believe you." So instantaneously, what I was watching totally disappeared, replaced by something totally different. Now what I was watching was about 100 stars that were large, and they weren't in the sky like a normal star would be. No, they were inside where that object was, in the location of it. And then they were blinking on and off like this, on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. And then one by one, they would take turns getting real big, like the size of the moon, and then getting real small. And then another one would do it real big and then real small. And then another one in a different location. So after like 10 minutes, you know, there was no more explanation of what this was. Everyone knew that this was not man-made. And so there was telepathic communication taking place. And then after that, I saw an NDE video the very next day. That whole experience with that UAP lasted about an hour. And again, as I said, this was a holographic projection, because as soon as I had that thought of, "You better come up with some better junk than this, because my friends don't believe you," that image that I was watching totally disappeared and something new was put in front of you. So we're dealing with experiences of projection from an external reality. Just like you see a ghost, you know, it might not be from your 3D physical reality, but you're having an external physical image projected in front of you. Anyway, so the very next day, I saw a video of NDEs. I went berserk. I had no idea what an NDE was. I then spent the whole night, you know, listening to all these testimonies of NDEs. I wound up going to Amazon. I purchased like 20 books on Amazon, and it started 4 hours a day reading these NDE books then it went to 6 hours, then it went to 8 hours, then it went to 10 hours. Eventually, by December, which is 4 months later, I was 16 hours a day reading these NDE books and also books on the science of consciousness, not the metaphysics of it, but the science of consciousness. And then 3 days in a row, the very first 3 people I ever mentioned NDEs to. First one was my daughter's pediatrician with my daughter right next to me. The second one was this man at church who I never met before, and in a church social dinner on Saturday night. And the last one was my own father. And the very first 3 people I ever mentioned NDEs to, all of them had it. And for the first 2 people, a robotic voice came out of me, saying, like, for example, the medical doctor, "Excuse me, doctor, have you ever heard the term near-death experiences? I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this topic. Many were written by medical doctors such as yourself, and it's a phenomenon that you need to know about." So previous to this, for the last month, my wife was saying that she's going to divorce me, that I'm going crazy. I need to go to a psychiatrist. I need to take pills, because I'm going nuts. And by then, I've had everything in the kitchen sink, out-of-body experiences, taken to other realities, the whole paranormal bit that Kevin knows what I'm talking about. and so here I was reading these NDE books now in late December. The dates were December 21st, 2012, December 22nd, 2012, December 23rd, 2012. It was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then many months later, someone told me, "Do you know the significance of that date, December 21st, 2012? I said, "No." "Well, that's the date of the Mayan calendar." I said, "What the hell is the Mayan calendar?" And I still don't understand it. I know it has to do something with every 26,000 years. There's a cycle change and, some metaphysics stuff, which really doesn't interest me. But what interests me was Friday was the pediatrician. She looked at me, like with her eyes all startled. And I said, "Now this woman thinks I'm crazy." And I said, "Excuse me, doctor, I apologize. I don't know why I said that, And so she goes, "There's no need to apologize. How did you know I had one?" And then with my daughter next to me, she closes up her office for 15 minutes and she begins to tell my daughter and I of her near-death experience. So that was a Friday. Saturday was this man at a church social dinner, and I won't go into those details. But the same robot came out of my voice, and in my head, I'm thinking Monday morning I need to go to a shrink because I'm freaking crazy. I need to take some pills. I have another man inside of me, talking. And so thank God that only lasted those 2 days. On the third day, I visited my father, and I thought he was the world's biggest atheist. He was very, very ill. He was bedridden. So I told him, without that robot voice, with my mother next to me, what happened on Friday, what happened on Saturday. So he goes, that happened to me. So then my father then told me the most profound NDE story that I have ever read or ever heard on YouTube. He told me he was up there 20 to 30 years. And I said, "What do you mean 20, 30 years? He said, "That's how long it took God to show me all the good things I had done in my life and all the bad things I had done in my life." And he said, "There is no such thing as hell. Why? Because God is pure love, and this is coming from, the Cuban Archie Bunker, and I'm like totally shocked, that this is coming out of my father's mouth. And he just went on and on and on. Time doesn't exist. We judge ourselves. God doesn't judge us. It just went on and on. And that night when I went home, I'm skipping a lot of details, but when I went home was the first time in my life that I spoke with God. Okay. And to the intelligence that's working with me, and I call them modern angels, because they have all the powers and abilities of a biblical angel, and so it was that day that I found my spirituality. And after that day of that NDE revelation and my spirituality, it was just a massive explosion of paranormal activities, and how the book was formed, the Beyond book, UFOs book. It was in May of 2013. I was driving my car in the middle of a traffic jam at 8:30 in the morning, right next to Miami Airport, listening to this man talking about a documentary that he's doing on his liposuction and art fat. He's doing sculptures with art fat, which I found fascinating. And then all of a sudden, poof, I'm not in my car anymore. And it was all darkness. I'm just pure mind. And then little by little, I'm starting to see, and I'm inside this huge, gigantic wheel in the fulcrum, the very center of it. And then the wheel is like a cart, has different sections of it, and is spinning around slowly. So inside each section of the wheel was a video. And so I was getting downloads. At the same time, I was focusing on each portion of the cart. And so I was looking at one, and I knew that was UFOs. I looked at another one that was near-death experiences. Another one was out-of-body experiences. It went through all of the contact, not all, but the major contact modalities. And I was getting information at the same time about each one, and getting science and physics, downloads, which I'm not into math. I'm not into physics. And so it was all coming at the same time. And then I got a specific message. It wasn't a voice. It was just pure information. And it was that you need to inform humanity of the relationship between us, the spirit world, and consciousness. Now, when I was receiving that information, I had no idea what these terms signified. It was only afterwards that I realized what these terms eventually meant to me. The relationship between us is, we're all one. God is the mind of God. We're all part of the mind of God. Us is the wholeness of the universal mind, okay? The spirit world talks about how we, as individuated units of consciousness, when we physically die in this 3D reality and return back to source, is that whole process of the spirit world. That's how it was relayed to me. And then consciousness, what I was informed, is the actual fabric of our reality. It's the mechanism that makes all of this work. And then it said you will. Then it said all of what you just saw. Okay, because I didn't have the term contact modalities at that time. It said these are all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil of your reality and having contact with us. Okay, us is the plural, the mind of God. Okay, and it said that humans are studying them as separate and distinct phenomena, but in fact, it's one phenomenon. Okay, and the glue, that's the word that they used, the glue, so I can able to understand it. The glue that's holding it all together, humans are calling it consciousness. Okay, but in fact, what it is, it's the fabric of our reality. Okay, and then it said you will need help to accomplish, the task that we've given you. They didn't use the word task, but you'll need help to move forward. Okay, and there's two criteria. This is not about you getting rich and making money off of all of this. And secondly, the people that you seek help from have to be individuals with minimal ego. Okay, so once they said minimal ego, boom, I'm back in the car listening to this guy doing a documentary of liposuction. It didn't even skip a second. It was like I was taken outside of space and outside of time and reintroduced back, with no time relapsed. I was hyperventilating, trying to adjust to what the hell just took place. When I went to work, I couldn't work. I came home early that day. And when I got home, I got an email from Marie Rodwell, and she's a major researcher of UFO contact experiencers. She's been doing this for over 30 years. And if anyone has any doubts, if you ever do talk to Mary, ask her this question. Say, Ray told me this crazy story, and I want to know whether it's true or not. And what it was, that in her email, she said, Dear Ray, I'm sorry that I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it just appeared on my computer today. Okay. And so I sent her a message back. I said, this is what's happened in the last 6 months, all these paranormal experiences. And this is what happened today. And I told her exactly the details of what I experienced. So then she said, oh my God, Ray, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. So she showed me how to use Skype. And we communicated till 1:30 in the morning. What had happened was back in October, I had sent a desperation email to like 10 very famous names in ufology. Whitley, Strieber, and then Grant Cameron were the only people that responded to my email. So that was Mary's response to my desperation call, because I wanted someone to talk to me because I thought I was going crazy. And so we talked till 1:30 in the morning, and I said, look, Mary, I got to go to work the next day. And we agreed to continue our conversations. And then the next morning, at 9:30 in the morning, which is literally 25 hours after my experience, I got a phone call. Hello, is this Rey Hernandez? Yes, who's this? Dr. Rudy Shields. Who? I had no idea who this man was. And he said, Mary didn't tell you that I was calling you? I said, no. I said, who are you? He says, I work with Mary. I'm a retired professor of astrophysics from Harvard University. I was teaching there, researching there for 45 years. And I work with Mary to interview experiencers that have had downloads of consciousness and quantum physics and other science-related topics. So he was calling me to talk about my experience. He said, can I talk to you? And I said, sure, So I was very surprised. And then later I got the email from Mary. Rudy had jumped the gun. So Mary's email said, look, Ray, I let Rudy know about your experience, but I'm waiting for you to tell me it's okay to talk to you. And then I'll give him the green light. And so he jumped the gun. And so then he began to tell me all the details of his work with the late Dr. John Mack, who was a professor at the Harvard Medical School. He had been working with UFO contact experiencers before he passed away. And that he also reached the hypothesis that this was conscious-based experiences. And that was the theory of Rudy Shields as well. And then he said, Ray, what you got was a download of Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness, which is a multi-dimensional theory involving Edgar's theory of non-local consciousness, which we do have his magnum opus article on non-local consciousness in our book. And so he began to explain it and how it matched what I had experienced. And so after, towards the end of it, he said, look, Ray, you're going to need some help. I'm here to help you. I volunteer to be your scientist, to assist you in your project. And then he goes, write down this telephone number. So I wrote it down. And so he said, this is the telephone number of my mentor. And I'm thinking to myself, who in the hell can be this guy's mentor? He's been a professor of astrophysics at Harvard for 45 years. So I asked him, who's your mentor? And he says, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And by then I knew who Edgar Mitchell was, the sixth man to walk on the moon. He was the founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences. A lot of people don't know he was also the co-founder of Eternia, which is an NDE-based, spirituality-based organization. And that was co-founded with Dr. Eben Alexander and with another gentleman who co-founded IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So it was at that, I knew that Edgar was very much interested in many of the contact modalities. And he had always been advocating about UFO disclosure and the government acknowledging the phenomenon of UFOs. So anyway, I worked up the courage to give Edgar a call after like 4 hours later. And he told me, look, Rudy already told me, we already had a lengthy conversation that you're someone that I need to talk to in person. And he says, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, no, I'm just going to work. He says, can you take the day off from work? I said, of course I can take it, to meet you. And he said, well, what time can you get here? How about 10 o'clock, he says. And I said, okay, 10 o'clock is fine. So within, 50 hours of my experience, I was at the home of Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And I won't go into all the details of what he told me, but I was there for more than 6 hours. And then subsequent to that, I was at his home more than 25 different times, because it was at his home that the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation got started. And just as a background to it, if anyone here can send me their email, And my email is info, I-N-F-O, at agreaterreality.com. So it's INFO at agreaterreality.com. I will send you various chapters from my first book, over 400 pages from my first book. And that'll have chapters 1 and 2, which is an analysis of our surveys. And also a chapter on medical healings. I'll send you an academic article that was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration as well, and several other chapters. So that research study was the world's first comprehensive academic research study on people that have seen UFOs and have had some type of contact with a non-human intelligence. And so we developed 3 surveys. The quantitative questions were 660 quantitative questions. The open-ended questions, we had 70 open-ended questions. And so we received for the quantitative portion over 4,350 responses from individuals from more than 125 countries. So this is a huge sample pool. And then for the open-ended questions, we received almost 1,500 responses. Why? Because it was 70 questions, and people took literally weeks to write out the details to those questions. So it was really a lot of work for these individuals that took our surveys. But our research findings totally contradict what's circulating in the field of ufology. And I could go into some of those research findings. For example, one which might be of interest in this group is that these experiencers were having primarily paranormal experiences and not necessarily physical experience. Like in my case, I've called down 4 UFOs. So it was 4 physical UFO experiences. In terms of beings, I've only seen 1 being, and that's the being in my living room. But in terms of paranormal experiences, I had 4 years of paranormal experiences, from out-of-body experiences, from being taken to other realities, from getting information downloads, from seeing different, I wouldn't say physical beings, but different types of intelligence that was around me, for example, shadow beings, etc. So what we found out in terms of these individuals, that 80% of them were having out-of-body experiences. 80%, 8 out of 10 people. People that were getting telepathic information, 80% as well, telepathic information. People that were seeing deceased entities, discarnate spirits, ghost spirits, whatever you might want to call it, was 67%. Near-death experiences, 37% had near-death experiences. People that were brought to other realities, okay? That was 50%. Like in my case, 50% of these people were brought to other matrix-like realities. In terms of medical healings, we had 50% had medical healings. And roughly 1/3 of the members of our research team, including the professors, had miraculous medical healings. I could go on with the paranormal topic, and it was large numbers that had it. In terms of messages that they were receiving, tons of messages about, about God, about spirituality, ecological messages. I could go on and on and on. Now, we wrote a whole section of our book just on the paranormal experiences that people had. Another major topic that we want to explore were these experiences positive, negative, or neutral. And we asked 24 quantitative questions, because how you phrase a question, you'll get a different response. And also we had in our open-ended questions, we addressed that topic as well. And what we found was that initially 37% of these individuals viewed their experiences as negative, 37%. But the overwhelming majority of these people had numerous experiences afterwards. We were able to document that the more experiences you had, the more was your rate of positive experiences. So the people had, for example, 40% of the people had more than 20 experiences. These individuals, everyone saw it as positive. Okay, it was the people that had one or two experiences only. They had a higher rate of negativity. Okay, why? Because they hadn't had a chance to process their experience, and they hadn't had subsequent experiences to change their initial viewpoint of their initial experience. But by the end, when they were taking our surveys, only 4%, that's it, only 4% viewed their experiences as negative. Okay, we even asked the question, if you could stop your ET contact experiences, would you? Well, 86% said, keep it coming, baby, keep it coming. Okay, so if this was such a negative experience, why did 86% say no, keep it coming? And so that's just an example of the 24 questions that we asked on positive, negative, and neutral. We even asked the question for the different types of physical beings that people were encountering. And what we discovered was that the number one type of being was not the small grays. The number one type of being was the energy being. Okay. Now, what I saw, I would categorize as an energy being. Okay. So that was number one. Number two was the human looking beings. Okay. Number three came the short grays. And then number four came the ghosts and spirits, form, physical form. And what we discovered was that out of those four, the energy being had a negativity rate of like 5%. The human looking being had a negativity rate of like 5%. Okay. The small grays was 10.5%. That's it. Only 10.5% viewed it as negative. But yet, if you go to the internet or these UFO conferences, people like David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and all those people that started the whole abduction genre, you would think that all these experiences with the short grays were highly negative. No, it was over 1,300 people, 350 people had experiences with the short grays. Very, very large numbers. Okay, we're not talking about 4 or 5 people. David Jacobs at most only worked with 200 people. That's it, 200 people. And then he only pre-selected who he worked with. He only had people that viewed their experiences as highly negative, just like Bud Hopkins. So they pre-selected their candidates. And so we didn't, and we had 1,350 people.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm going to put people into breakout rooms to have small group discussion. I love the topic. I'm so very much enthralled, and I have a few follow-up questions. But for those people who are here, just know that you can tune into the recording afterward if you want to join a small group. This is the first time I am putting people into breakout rooms. So Ray, do not accept this so you can stay with me and have the conversation. And those who want to can continue to stay. So we are creating these breakout rooms, and I am going to click open all rooms, and you should have an invitation if you want to participate. Assign a timekeeper. There will be about 20 minutes where you can have a discussion. You can share your own contact experience. You can speak from the heart. If you need support in your life or whatever, you can speak like that. But you'll have about 20 minutes. And then I'll give you a notification that there'll be 2 minutes left, and then I'll close the breakout room so you can join us for the Q&A and discussion afterwards. So yes, thanks for going in there. So Ray, I just wanted to ask you about the experience of receiving like 1,000 stories, right? Or like 4,000 people's stories, because I know as someone who has studied dreams and I work with stories, they're actually personally impactful on me. Like I have to open my mind. I have to practice meditation before I hear people's stories in a good way. What are the sort of impact or like, I mean, you're writing a second book, so it must have been very impactful to receive all these stories. But I was hoping you could speak about that experience of just relating to and discovering what came up out of this experience for you.
Well, we had various academics, all of them retired academics that were part of our group. And what we had is we wanted to analyze the quantitative data. For those that do not know what that means, it's basically the questions were either A or B, yes or no, or choose like a multiple choice, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. type of responses. So these are fixed choice answers. For some questions, you can choose more than one. And so we wanted to analyze that. So we had a whole team that, with a PhD statistician, Dr. Russell Scalpone, that analyzed that data. So we came up with numerous charts and bar graphs, and if this is the case, then how many of those? Like, for example, we had a cross comparative tabulation of the people that had the number of experiences they had, and then we looked at how they answered, whether their experiences were positive, negative, or neutral. And so we had a bar chart that went like this, that showed that the more experiences you had, the more positive was your response. And towards the very end, it was like 100%. So it shows that the more experiences you had, the more positive you viewed them. And then we had for the process of analyzing the open-ended questions, that was a little bit more complicated. We focused on 8 of the open-ended questions. And it was the open-ended questions that dealt with various aspects of the multiverse and consciousness. There were, it was like 6 out of those 8. The other one were more materialist related. And so what we did is we took the first 1,000 cases, and we had 5 people, each of them read these 8 responses, and they had 200 people that they were supposed to read. So it was a lot of reading. And then we asked the 5 people to do a summary for each case. And so we then sent to Dr. John Klimo, who taught qualitative research methodology. So this is how do you analyze interviews, open-ended interviews. And so we gave him thousands of pages of our summaries to these stories. And so he was the one that would read them, and he wrote chapter 2 for our book. So I can give each of you a copy of chapter 2. Just send me an email and I'll send it to you. And these were, truly unbelievable, extraordinary experiences that these people were having. What we were able to demonstrate was that a very large number, it was actually 50% of these people, had a miraculous medical healing, just like our dog. 50% of these people were brought to other realities, just like I had them. So it's not like Rey Hernandez is going through this. We're talking about thousands of people that are going through the same type of experiences. We were able to determine that once you've had one of these contact modalities, for example, if you've had a near-death experience, okay, many of these people later on saw deceased people, okay? If you saw a UFO, you're also going to see deceased people. The people that have had near-death experiences began having out-of-body experiences. People that had UFOs began having out-of-body experiences. Or the people that have started with an out-of-body experience. All of a sudden, you pop out of your body while you were sleeping, you see your body underneath you, and you're like freaking out, And then because you get tense, you go back to the body where you say, okay, I'm going to find out what happened to me. You research it, and then you learn not to get scared. And you begin to do additional OBEs. And then over time, all of a sudden, you read about astral travel, and then you finally learn how to do it. And it takes a while, and then you master that, of going to other realities, other dimensions. So in the middle of all of this, all of a sudden, boom, you begin to see UFOs. Like, how in the hell did this take place? I was doing astral travel, What the hell does UFOs have to do with astral traveling? Or, that's what we were able to find out with these stories, was that these individuals are triggered by these contact modalities. And these are all consciousness-based experiences. And that's why I argue in my next book that all of the contact modalities need to be researched as one phenomenon, not as separate and distinct like we're doing now. Let me just give you a couple of illustrations. This was about maybe 6 years ago. I went to the national conference in Orlando of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. I was invited by 2 individuals that had near-death experiences, but they've also seen UFOs. They've also seen ghosts and spirits. They've had a little bit of everything. And so they invited me to the conference, and then they introduced me to the president, the vice president, the treasurer, all the ruling body of that group. And all of them were like, what the hell does UFOs have to do with NDEs? What does out of body have to do with NDEs? We know that many people, their NDE starts popping out of the body, but the people that just pop out of the body without an NDE, what does that have to do with NDEs? And I'm saying to myself, all these people so clueless, that they really just don't, are not even open to even hearing me talk and tell them these things, because I've got data, okay? And I found out later, because I became very good friends with many of the major researchers on near-death experiences. The person that opened up the doors for me was Dr. Kenneth Ring, and he was together with Dr. Bruce Grayson, the two major academic researchers on near-death experiences. We had borrowed, I had gotten the permission of Dr. Kenneth Ring to use 70 of his questions from his book, The Omega Project. And the Omega Project compared 85 people that had near-death experiences with 85 people that had abduction experiences. And it was close to 400 questions in his book, because it was a statistical research study. And out of those 400 questions, 70 dealt with how did these people change? How were they before and how were they later? And so we asked those questions. And that was one of our major research findings, was that we duplicated exactly his research findings. That was both groups, both the NDE group and the UFO group, made radical transformations for the positive in their worldview. For example, people became much more spiritual, less religious, less materialistic, less egotistical, much more loving, okay? All of a sudden, ecology was important to them, okay? They became much more consciously aware. I could go on and on and on. So it's all the categories that you would want your spouse to be, you would want your children to be, you would have wanted your parents to be. It's these tremendous transformation for the positive. But you would expect those from the NDE group, but you wouldn't expect it from the UFO group. That's exactly what we found in our research data. What we found was that these UFO contact experiencers, okay, totally changed. A couple of examples. I don't know how well some of you are versed in the UFO contact literature, but Whitley Strieber was one of these people that really established the genre of the negative abduction phenomenon. Okay, so he wrote the book Communion, which is a horrible experience. And over the last 5 years, he's published these books that are just love and light. It's all about spirituality. In a recent interview, I heard him praying to God and giving thanks to these beings, which allowed him to communicate with his deceased wife. Okay. And it's all about God. It's about spirituality, the afterlife. So you wouldn't associate that language with a man that was horrified by abductions. But just like everyone else, NDE is near-death experiences. Okay. And so, but what happened is, just like all the other people that took our surveys, okay, these people transformed, because initially, what we discovered was only 1/3 of these people had what is called an abduction. That means a physical relocation to another location without your agreement. Okay, 1/3. The other 2/3 never had an abduction. Okay, it was from the negativity comes from that 1/3 that's had an abduction. But over many, many years, 80% of the people that had an abduction, they don't call themselves abductees. They call themselves contactees. Why? Because their experiences changed over time. For example, let me give you two examples, okay? One is my best friend in Miami, who's one of the world's major contact experiencers that no one knows about. He's a retired DEA federal agent, okay, of all things, okay? And his wife is a PhD psychologist. His daughter's a PhD psychologist. He would have these very scareful experiences where he'd be paralyzed. He would not remember the beings that were around him, but he knew that there were other intelligences around him, and he was paralyzed. And that occurred for many, many years, okay? later, his experiences, he has seen hundreds of human-looking beings. Okay, human dressed in white monk's robes or white Greek tunics, and many of them would bring him to other realities. He's watching TV. All of a sudden, he says, "Ray, Zeus came by. I was watching TV last night." So what are you talking about? Zeus came by. Well, I don't know how to describe, but he was like 7 feet tall. He had a long beard. He had a white robe, like Zeus wore in those Greek, movies. So I called him Zeus. He's like 7 feet tall, very muscular. And he goes, "Alberto, I know you've been thinking about death lately. And so he said, there's no need to fear death. Let me show you what death is like." And gave him a near-death experience. Brought him out of his body through the tunnel, the whole works, and was teaching him along the way. And then, poof, brought him back to his body watching, the 11 o'clock news, And so he's had hundreds of similar experiences to that. And now he's all Mr. Spirituality. Why? Because another time he was brought directly to God. It was this energy being, okay? Again, he was on the TV, and all of a sudden, boom, he's not there at the TV anymore. He's in another reality, another dimension, and all of a sudden, this huge, gigantic ball of energy appears right next to him and says, "Alberto, beyond me, there's nothing else." And he held him there for like a minute or so till he totally absorbed it, and then boom, he's back in front of the TV again. So that's just an example. Another one's Reverend Michael Carter. Again, very petrifying abduction type of experiences, seeing these beings. Okay, and then later on, he began to see these Palladian-looking beings. With the blonde hair, the blue eyes, and the blue skin-tight suit. And they healed him one time. He told me a story. This is a reverend. This is an ordained minister. He got a master's from the New York Theological Seminary, okay? Yeah, he got his own church, is the real McCoy, okay? And he's telling me that he was released from a hospital when he was in New York. His leg was super swollen. He had a blood clot. And that night that he was released, he was in a lot of pain. So as a good reverend, he began to pray. And what appeared to him was one of these human Palladian type of beings that materialized, just like in Star Trek, like beam me up, Scotty, that type of thing, materialized right in front of him, held his hand out. When he opened the hand, okay, and a purple orb was in there. The purple orb went into his body, then he started shaking, and then he passed out. And when he woke up, all of a sudden he said, "Ray, I could have run a marathon." His leg was totally healed, just like our dog, okay? And in our book, we had chapter 6, which I will send to each of you. And 3 of those involved being healed by an orb, okay? So it's a very common phenomenon, but people just don't talk about it for fear of ridicule. And so, so again, Kathleen Martin, some of you might know, I know Kevin was here before. He worked with Kathleen Martin on her new book. Kathleen started writing just about abductions because she was the niece of Betty Hill, and she wrote the book Captured by Benny and Barney Hill, okay? Kathleen just published a book, From Abductions to Spirituality, okay? So the same thing like Whitley Strieber, okay? People that initially viewed it from a negative perspective, but then towards the end of their life, it's like it's all love and light. It's all about spirituality. So this is the common thread of the 4,300 people that took our surveys.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So you've mentioned a few like hypnotists and a sense of, I know that Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber kind of work together. I know you've mentioned John Mack, who had a different perspective. And there is a sort of cultural narrative around negativity and abduction experience. You're
Correct.
Pointing to its transformation, but I wonder if you could speak about the role of like hypnotism in figuring that out, and why some hypnotists that seem to be well respected really aim towards this negative view of abduction.
Okay, let me address that question. We had 3 individuals that were very close to the late Dr. John Mack as part of our research group. Rudy Shields, was a close friend of Dr. John Mack. And he was the one that told Dr. John Mack about the multidimensional aspects of our reality, and also about the physics aspects of consciousness. Dr. John Mack was well versed about consciousness, because he was exploring these topics before he got into the abduction phenomenon. Now, originally, when he was exposed to this topic by Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins gave him many of the clients that he had been working with. So these are people already that have been tainted by Bud Hopkins, okay? Bud Hopkins' wife wrote a chapter talking about how her husband and Jacobs basically developed this whole negativity of the abduction phenomenon, because they were the first to publicize this. For 35 years, they were invited to all the major UFO conferences over and over again, year after year after year. So they created that genre. What people don't know is that I met with many of the people that went to Bud Hopkins and went to David Jacobs, and they were told, maybe you need to go see Barbara Lamb. You know, I'm a little bit busy. Or maybe you need to go see Leo Sprinkle, Dr. Leo Sprinkle. Why? Because their perspective of it was totally different. It wasn't negative. Many of the people, like for example, like the Reverend Michael Carter, when his experiences changed to become much more positive, he told me that basically Bud Hopkins kicked him out of the group, because they would have like a support group. So here he was having all these positive experiences, and he just didn't match with that environment of just talking of negativity, okay? Bud Hopkins' wife showed me videos, because she was a cinematographer, of hypnotic sessions that Bud Hopkins did. And if you paid attention to it, and many of them are on the internet, it was like one leading question after another. You know, did the reptilian eat your child, or did it rape your wife? Which one was it, you know? So you already got people that were scared to begin with, and then you begin and you penetrate them with leading questions after another. And these people are not familiar with anything, you know, that no one had ever done academic research study on it. So they're going to wind up being even more frightened. And these people were not therapists, you know. You want someone to help you in terms of, hey, what the hell is going on? I think I'm going crazy, you know. Instead, these people were coming out much more frightened. So they were in their interviews, because I listened to many of their interviews. For example, David Jacobs said that he's never met an individual that's had UFO contact that's had a positive experience. Never, not one. Okay. So to me, it's like, what the hell is he talking about? Our research study, 4,300 people, showed the total opposite. And what I found out, he only worked with 200 people. That's it. 200 people, he stated in his interviews, maximum. Okay. He was never trained like Dr. John Mack into these things. And so, you know, as they say in the vernacular, shit in and shit out, you know. So this is not academic research. But yet, if you went to these UFO conferences for 30 years, or if you had these experiences, what were the books that you bought? You bought Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, which was frightening as all hell. You bought the books by Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs. That's it, okay? There was very little out there. What's the name? Leo Sprinkle only wrote one book over that time period. Barbara Lamb, for a very long time, she only wrote one book. Marie Rodwell wrote one book before her second book, which was many, many years later. So you didn't have that literature out there. What you had was individual stories, abduction stories, you know, one-on-one, and certainly no academic research on it. So people naturally gravitated to, you know, Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and Whitley Strieber. And then Kathleen Martin got in on it, okay? But yet, you know, Kathleen changed her tune over many years, you know, because initially she viewed it from that abduction perspective, but then over the years she would work with many, many people and found out that this was very, very different than a pure abduction perspective. And Kevin, that was here earlier with us, is a good friend of Kathleen Martin and can tell you more intimate personal details. But like I said before, she just recently came out with a book, From Abduction to Spirituality. So what it was that these individuals established a paradigm, the abduction paradigm, which unfortunately has been in place in the internet and these UFO conferences for many, many, many years. But yet our academic research work changed the paradigm.
Wonderful, thank you. I know you just got back from is it Ozark, the UFO conference, but you made a post today about Dolores Cannon being a pioneer. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the quantum healing hypnosis technique and that, because she did work with abduction stories, but she seems sort of out of that clique of the Bud Hopkins-esque stuff. So could you speak
Dolores
on that?
Cannon didn't pre-select the people that she worked with. Okay. I guess she pre-selected them if they had a crazy story to tell. and she ran with it. And she tape recorded these interviews. And her books were the tape recordings of her interviews. And so her stories of what the experiencers told us of the UFO phenomenon were more in line with what we discovered in our research study. And NDEs and OBEs, that these were all consciousness-based phenomena. So her books were substantiating that total flip to the UFO phenomenon. But the people that were reading Dolores Cannon's books were not the UFO people. You know, they were not the ufologists. It was more the metaphysical people, people that were focusing on the consciousness aspect of metaphysics, some of the experiencers, but it was a totally different crowd. But Dolores Cannon was, light years ahead of everyone else because her work was substantiating the work that we're doing now at CCRI, that these are all consciousness-based phenomena, that there is a universal mind, God, behind all of these experiences, that all of the paranormal needs to be studied as one integrated phenomenon, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that we're talking about even predate Dolores Cannon. These are all ancient mystical traditions that were all of them spoke about these things. But yes, the last time I spoke 3 years ago, I paid a tribute to Dolores Cannon before my lecture. I conversed with her daughter. Her name is Nancy. And so did I address your question?
You did, thank you. Yeah. So next hangout we will be having Candace Crott Goldman, who was a student of Dolores Cannon and brought some of that work forward and online. I do have a follow-up question. I mean, you're talking about everything being in the mind of consciousness and things like that. You talk a little bit about leading questions. There's a sense of needing to be objective in our work, but how does this subject-object duality work if we're in a greater mind or the greater reality of a single consciousness? Would the subject-object or our almost focus on objectivity in the scientific world, what happens to it, basically?
Well, let me give you a generalized response to that. I've learned to be open-minded to everything. Why? Because there are possibilities of everything to occur. And also the stories that I have learned from individuals, both in terms of our surveys and meeting people personally, they run the whole gambit of high strangeness. And years ago, even after we published our book, I was still, doubting a lot of information, but now I have discernment, but I don't have doubting of everything. So you have to have discernment. But for example, another thing that maybe I introduce it to everyone here, that's one of the questions that you asked of how can we expand this later on. And I think one way of doing it is that I take the opportunity of almost everyone that I meet. I asked them about these topics. For example, I had my blood work done 2 weeks ago. There were 2 phlebotomists there. I introduced the topic of NDEs, okay? One of them had an NDE, the other one, her husband had it. Then we talked about ghosts and spirits, okay? Immediately, one said, after my NDE, I began to see all these dead people. And then the other phlebotomist that her husband had the NDE said, I saw my dead mother. So I said, have either of you spoken to anyone else about these things? And they said, no, we've never spoken to anybody. And I said, have you ever spoken about it to each other? And they said, never. I said, well, you see how easy it is to open up your mouth and start talking about these things, And what you realize is that we were in a hospital. I said, I bet you half the people in this hospital that are here right now have had these paranormal experiences. They've just never mentioned it to anyone else. Okay. I went to get a haircut, another city, because I went to see my daughter where she's going to college. So I said, what the hell? Let me get a haircut here. Right. And so there were 3 barbers, and I was the only client. One barber was about to cut my hair. The other one was sweeping the floor. And the other one was just reading a paper or magazine or something like that. So I asked the guy that's cutting my hair, oh, did you hear about the UFO disclosure? You know, that took place with the Pentagon releasing, you know, acknowledging UFOs. And so the guy that's like reading a magazine said, we were just talking about that yesterday. Wow, what a coincidence. What a coincidence, right? And then I said, well, it's not just about UFOs. It's a little bit more complicated than UFOs. And I started telling them about, you know, out-of-body experiences, NDEs, etc. All of a sudden, the guy that's cutting my hair goes, I pop out of my body all the time. And so he's cutting my hair and he's telling me about all the different times he's pops out of his hair. And he said, I've also had paranormal experiences. Well, what was your last experience? Well, about 2 months ago, I woke up and there was a being. He was like a shadow, real huge and dark. And I was frightened to death. And I hid myself under the sheets. And I was saying, should I make a run for it? Or should I just stay here? Should I make a run for it or should I stay? He goes, the hell with it. I'm going to make a run for it. So when he put the sheets down and went to run, it wasn't there anymore. So the guy that's sweeping the floor goes, that ain't shit, you know, and starts telling about all of his paranormal experiences. And that he grew up in a poltergeist house, that he and his sister slept with their parents more than they did in their bedrooms. And all of a sudden, the whole Pandora's box of the paranormal, the discussions that we were having. And again, I asked them, have you guys ever spoken about this to anyone else? They said, no. Okay. And certainly not to each other. And so I do that all the time. And I don't get a hit rate 100% of the time, but a very large percentage of the time, I get a good hit rate, you know, that people all of a sudden open up about their experiences. So I remember that was one of the questions that you had asked. And when you were starting the conversation is how do you stimulate these types of conversations? And to me, it's like, do it among your family, okay? Do it among your friends. For example, I was shopping at a big shopping grocery store, right? And checking out, there was one of those British tabloids that Kevin knows very well about, okay? And they're talking about UFOs and stuff like that. So there was a lady in front of him, and we were talking in Spanish. I said, you know, don't underestimate UFOs. You know, they're making it to appear like a joke, but you know, I think it's very real. She goes, she turns around and she looks at me. She goes, I know they're real. You know, and that's telling me about a UFO that she saw in Miami. So it's like all the time I bring out these entry points of conversation, and you'd be surprised how many people respond to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone, from the breakout room. So now we've got some questions coming into the chat, and we can, I think, shift over to that. I heard, I just want to just call out that you're talking about sharing these stories and asking questions and engaging people, and that's a really good way. There's a question up here about why some people have direct contact and other people do not. I hope you could address that and also maybe speak about the best ways perhaps to make contact with this greater reality.
I get that question all the time. People have never had any contact experiences or paranormal experiences like, I want one, you know? And they're really, I don't think there are any answers for it. The only thing I could say is that once you've had one, it opens up the door to others, okay? And like my experiences, I'm 65 years old, almost 66. And my first experience happened in 2012. That was 10 years ago. So I was 55 years old. So, you know, they waited 55 years to hit me over the head with a 2x4. And they beat the crap out of me because that lasted for 4 years and it was like nonstop. And, but in terms of, you know, why some people have it, others don't, I don't have any response to that. I think it's all part of our mission, part of our plan. We're born into this 3D reality with a mission, with a plan. We do have free will because if you fully realize that the NDE phenomenon of a life review exists, then you know they're judging your free will decisions. Okay, you know, when you made the right decisions, when you made the wrong decisions, and God doesn't judge us. It's we're the ones that judge ourselves. So, but I think that many times I think that we're in a play, like a Shakespearean play. You know how the last scene is going to end, but during that whole play, as an actor, you have room to improvise. You know, to change the language of the script. So that's how I kind of see my life. It's like, you know, I was born for this, and just how they gave me spirituality. You know, they gave me spirituality over a 4-month period, and especially over those last 3 days, 3 days in a row. Because what are the statistical probabilities of the very first 3 people you ever mentioned NDEs to after reading hundreds of NDE books over a 4-month period and acting like a crazy madman that your wife was about to divorce you? Those 3 days in a row, all those 3 people had an NDE. I mean, you can't make this up. How the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, again in threes, over a 3-day period, I was introduced to Mary Rodwell, Rudy Shields, and Edgar Mitchell. Okay, these were all orchestrated events. And that's how my life has been since that initial experience. It's one after another, these orchestrated, like the video crew. Kevin got to meet them because they interviewed him, and Kathleen Martin and Denise Stoner. Those folks were introduced to 3 different people who then introduced them to someone else, who introduced it to someone else. Okay, it was like 3 degrees of separation over a 2-day period. And then they introduced themselves to me. So it was like an orchestrated event. And then they've never seen these people afterwards since then, you know. And we've been working on this documentary for 5 years. So these are just examples of these orchestrations. So I think that, you know, the universal mind, God, you know, pre-selects people for different missions. And for me, it's for doing the work that I'm doing now. Now, in terms of ways to induce contact, okay, one very easy way is to join a local CE5 group, which I prefer the term HICE, Human Initiated Contact Experiences. And for example, in your neck of the woods there, Kevin, I brought 10 people from Miami to Mike Merber's home. And this is a Tampa attorney that started this group that meets once a month to call down UFOs. And so many of the contact experiences that he had were like orbs in the sky and these little flashes and things of that sort. But when I went in February, and it was freezing. By 12 o'clock, all the local people had gone home. And then the Miami folks, they went inside his house because he had a very large house with a lot of bedrooms. So Mike stayed out there with 2 other people. It was another young female and another man. And so something told me at 12:30 to go out there. Some of you know how that works. You know, you get this message, direct message, or an intuition that you need to do something. For me, was I needed to go out again. Okay, so I went out there and I focused. They were focusing on the southwest, and then I focused on the northeast, and I looked in a little area, a small area, and that's how I do these things. And then with 15 minutes, this large object, light, appeared. And it was very slow, low to the ground, coming at us. I thought it was a helicopter. And then after it slowly got to us, you know, at very low level, then it made a turn like this. And then everyone got to see it. And it looked like it was twice the size of a school bus, cylinder, silverish, okay? Like the Goodyear blimp, except it was much more elongated. And then one guy yells out, "Look, it's got no wings, it's got no wings." And then as many of these experiences turn out, they influence your mind. Mike said, "Oh, it's probably a secret military plane," right? And so in my head was, yes, it must be a secret military plane, you know? So and this was huge. And we were all watching this thing. It was a huge thing. And so I even wrote it on his diary. February, if any of you go down there, it was February, I forgot what year, 2019 it was. I think it was February 2019. So I have it in the diary, his diary. And so then on the way home, going to Miami, I never even mentioned that to anybody, right? Like 2 days later, I guess after that thought of that this intelligence told me, "Look, kid, chill down," you know. I called Mike up, the attorney, Princeton grad, by the way, not a crazy nut, okay? And so I told him, "Mike, what the hell did we see?" He says, "Ray, it was a UFO. I said, then why in the hell you said it was a secretary, it was a biplane or something? He says, I have no idea. And I said, I know why. Because they're able to influence you and to guide you, you know? Because he had this huge camera, video camera, huge. It was like these things that could zoom in and catch all the details, you know? No, he didn't take any pictures of it. Why? Because it was a secret military biplane. When I was out there with my daughter, my 3 friends watching this huge object, which is only 30 feet away from me, the first time I ever called a UFO, all of us had cell phones except my daughter. This thing was huge, like a little football stadium, 30 feet away from us. It was literally on top of my next door neighbor's house. Now, no one took a video of it. No one took a picture of it. You know, we would have taken a picture of it or a video. We would have been on the cover of Time magazine for the next 20 years, you know. And when I was materialist back then, you know, hey, I could have made millions of dollars from it, you know. But the reason why is they didn't allow it. A lot of people don't understand that, is that there's the 4 times that I've tried to call down a UFO, 5 times. I was successful 4 times. 4 times it was large objects that were in the sky. Each time was within 15 minutes it showed up. It's not something that you need to do for an hour, and you need to meditate and you know, do yoga chants for the next 3 hours. No, it doesn't work that way. It's like this instant connection. And that's why Sixto Paz from Grupo Rama, who started doing this in 1972, not 74, sorry. And a very good friend of mine from Peru, he also lives in Miami. His name is Giorgio Piacenza. And they told me that this was all consciousness based, and that in each group that does this, you need someone that is called an antenna. That means someone that has the ability to call them down. So my point is, if you go to one of these experiences and there's a good antenna there, the chances are that you will see, you know, what is commonly called a UFO or a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And once you've seen these things, your life gets totally transformed. So in terms of awakening to consciousness, our greater reality, that's one way. Another way is there's several people, several academics in the CCRI that their experiences started by hearing voices talking to them, okay? Some of them are well known, they're public, but I'm not gonna, you know, talk about them publicly. But one man that I will talk publicly, was a man that was quiet for many, many years. He's a professor of information sciences. He's a statistician. So he went to, and he lives in Canada, in Toronto. So he went to a yoga studio where they were doing holotropic breathing, which is controlled deep breaths that Stanislav Grof was one of the early parapsychologists investigated, and he got that technique from the ancient Vedic literature. I forgot which book it was, okay? But that talked about inducing altered states of consciousness through these in-depth breathing techniques. And Stanislav Grof was the one that developed that and expanded on it. So my friend goes there and he starts doing these deep breathing exercises, and he was just killing time like I was when I was calling down that UFO. Because a friend invited him and he said, oh, what the hell, I got nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon. He went with him. So he was in the middle of all that. All of a sudden, Raul, don't worry about your wife becoming pregnant. And i.e., for 5 years, they were trying to get pregnant through all these in vitro, procedures. So this voice tells them, don't worry about your wife becoming pregnant. Within 2 weeks, she's going to tell you that she's pregnant. It's going to be a girl, and you're going to give her this name, and gave him a name, okay? So all of a sudden, the man freaks out, thought he was going crazy. He runs out of that yoga studio, and he's like freaking out, like I was when that voice came out of me. Am I going crazy? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, within those 2 weeks, Raul, I'm pregnant, And then several months later, when she gets her sonogram, it's a girl. So now Raul is really freaking out, right? So Raul tells her, well, have you ever thought of his name? And he gives his wife the name that he was told by that being, by that intelligence. And the wife goes, I love that name. Let's call her that name. I love that name. So she was told within 2 weeks that she was pregnant. It's a girl, and they wound up giving her that name. Okay. Many people that have NDEs, they're told in the future, you got to go back. No, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. I say, well, later on, you're going to marry. Your husband's going to die, and you're going to have 4 kids, and they're going to need a mother to raise them. And if you die, it's going to be just, your husband raising them, or I forgot the details. I think the husband was alive. They didn't have any kids. Okay. So later on, when you do have the 4 kids, and you're not going to be there for them, the husband's, horrible, person. She winds up divorcing him. She's raising these 4 kids, or dies. There's like different stories, very, very similar, that you hear all the time. And so they're told the future. They're told about what's going to happen. Okay. I mean, there's hundreds of these stories that are on YouTube. All you have to do is, that's another thing. Go to YouTube and listen to these YouTube experiencers on NDEs. They totally transform your life. You at least once a week, you listen to one, for half an hour. You do that for a whole year, you'll never be the same. If you're a total atheist, that'll totally change you to a spiritual person. I guarantee it. So anyway, so that's one way, through these holographic breathing exercises. I've heard many other people that they have induced altered states of consciousness. And what this is just another way of deep meditation. There's people that learned how to meditate, these deep meditation techniques. And all of a sudden they pop out of their body. They're having them out of body experiences through meditation, and they're aware that they're conscious underneath there, but they're going going into astral realms, and they're getting information. They're communicating with different types of intelligences. So meditative techniques. Other people have tried, but I would not recommend it, ayahuasca, DMT, or mushrooms, psilocybin. And many people have had altered states of consciousness. In 50% of the cases, a being begins to interact with them. And but that's not a recreational drug, but yet academic research studies have demonstrated that it can induce altered states of consciousness. And in 50% of the cases, you will be communicating with a non-human intelligence. And many of these experiences are spiritually related, where the being is telling you about, the death process, and sort of.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, those are really good ways to make contact. I heard a couple of things I wanted to follow up on. One was this sense of overarching control. A couple times you said, like, I wasn't allowed to say this. Another time you're telling stories about people hearing voices and leaving their bodies and stuff like that. And I know that the Beyond UFO says it's all mostly positive, and the more you keep going is positive. But what would you say to someone who hasn't yet had an experience like this, that's hearing this and going, wow, that's so crazy. I don't want this greater mind to take over my body or thoughts or whatever. What would you say to someone like that?
I would agree with you. There was a period of time where I began to drink for an entire week because I was having nonstop experiences, and I was dealing with a human being who's not human. That sounds crazy, but yes, that was what was happening. And this man is real, but he's just not, fully human. And so most of my major experiences that I don't talk about publicly have happened with this person. And but yet other major experiencers have mentioned similar comments of similar experiences. But yet when these experiences get confirmed, okay, it's like your natural tendency is to dismiss it, because we're dealing with our 3D material reality. And it's just, it's so ingrained in us. Even though we are having all these paranormal experiences, you still revert back to, eating food, taking a shower, going to the bathroom, you fall down, you break a leg, you're still dealing with this physical 3D reality. So it's difficult for us to break away from that and begin to understand our higher self of who we really are. And so every major experience goes through this to the point where many wound up using drugs. They turn to alcohol for a certain period of time until they're able to to control it. And with me was that this man, who's not a man, sent another major experiencer to sort of like slap me in the face to wake me up, like this is real, because that other person told me the same exact things that this person had just told me a few days before. And then, it's same exact. So it's like these are orchestrated events, like sent him my way to like slap me up, like say, look, this is real, accept me. And even after that, I still didn't accept this guy. It took like 3 or 4 different experiences. And at the end, it's a major long story. I won't say it, but it was just crazy. They sent me to North Carolina to meet this guy that I only spoke to for 15 minutes about 2.5 years earlier. And but I had this increasing feeling that I needed to see this man, right? And it just got worse and worse and worse. And on the 3rd day, I was like a crack addict, where I needed or a heroin addict. I needed my heroin fix, and I needed to go up to North Carolina to see this guy, right? So I finally called this guy. I said, look, I need to see you. And you remember me? Yes, I remember you. Yeah, we had that conversation. You're the guy that had his dog was here. And I said, yeah. And we were introduced by Grant Cameron. You're the guy that had his dog healed as well. And so I won't mention his name, but it was like, I need to see you. But why? We can talk now. I said, no, you don't understand. I need to see you. I said, but why? I have no idea. Okay. So over those 2-day period, the first day I was just telling him about my experiences, because I'm sure this man thought I was a nut job. But he then started telling me about his experiences. And I realized this guy's a major experiencer. And he was getting the same physics downloads that this man was telling me. Okay. I said, this man was educating me like a tutor, about entropy. And there's only 2 fundamental forces in the universe. And he would give me these 90-minute lectures and, about that. And so this guy finally was getting all these downloads. He showed me a lot of cards like this of these 3-letter agencies. And he was getting these phone calls. No, I haven't gotten anything this week. No, nothing. No, if I do get it, I'll let you know, his physics downloads, right? And so he said, look, Ray, I'm just a poor country hillbilly from rural North Carolina. I don't know nothing about physics, okay? The only thing I understand was that they told me, look, I was going to say his name. There's only 2 fundamental forces in physics. And the way you could think of it is positive and negative, yin and yang, and even good and evil. That's exactly what this person had told me 3 days before, okay? And right before my experiences started, where I was a coke addict, that I needed to go up to see this guy, he had just told me that the day before. And I totally dismissed him. I said, this can't be. And so finally, when this friend told me the same exact verbiage, I was like pissed off, because I said, this dirtbag sent me to rural North Carolina just so I could finally accept him. Okay. And at the end, I finally accepted him. I said, okay, I publicly yelled, okay, I give up. You're real. I give up. After that, my experiences stopped. Isn't that crazy? Crazy.
Thank you.
But that's how my experiences have been, because now I was ready. Yeah. They had given me spirituality. I knew all these lessons that he had been giving me about the multiverse, about consciousness and the contact modalities. And obviously he didn't give me all the answers to everything, but he gave me a lot of teachings. And so now it was like I was ready to be turned loose,
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. We're almost at time, actually.
Sound like a crazy madman, don't I?
Oh, somewhat. No, actually, no. There is consistency in the sense of heightened activity. And I see that actually in my practices. A lot of people have this heightened activity and then, they're surrendered. They get it. It doesn't need to happen, right? So, and you talked about the play-like nature of this reality. I often think about it dream-like. We do have one question in the chat that maybe you could spend just a half a minute addressing, and then we can sign off.
Yes, Chester, whoever Chester is, yes.
Okay, and then the question from was how many spokes, realms, dimensions - range of experiences to the wheel of high strangeness? Does that
I didn't count the spokes because I was going through this, you're like overwhelmed, okay? But I would say it was between 8 to 10. It was not a huge number. What they were just trying to teach me is the main lesson is that all of these paranormal experiences need to be seen as one integrated phenomenon. But I understood also is that all of what we commonly call ESP, precognition and telekinesis, all that under the ESP umbrella, that obviously that's all under the umbrella of consciousness, And I did send you, I do get experiences now and then, okay? But they're very selective. Like one day I woke up and I had these two charts in my mind, and I sent it to you. But it's how do we graphically explain the nature of our reality in a very simplistic way to someone? And so I developed these two charts. We don't have enough time, right? But basically, it's going to be part of my chapter because I was really struggling. I hadn't written anything like in over 2 months because I had like writer's block. I had personal issues. I had health issues. And so I've only spent 4 nights writing my chapter, and I wrote like 80 pages. But then I stopped like for 2 months. And then all of a sudden I woke up and I had these 2 graphs. And then I found out through this software program that you can people overseas to do these graphs at very low cost. So like for $80, I got these 2 charts, and they came out excellent, exactly like how I wanted them. But it's a way for people to visualize the hierarchy of our reality.
Yeah. So that'll be a really great teaser for the Greater Reality book that is coming out shortly, it sounds like, right?
Hopefully, if I can start to write again, because I've been so busy with my own, IRS, my job, with my tax work. But hopefully by next week, my boss will leave me alone. I can spend some nights and days, working at it. And but yes, June 1st, it's going to have numerous chapters. You went through the topic categories, and most of them, as you saw the list there, were written by retired academics, and all of them. For example, we have 11 chapters on UFOs. All those articles, all of those 11 articles are all a consciousness-based approach to UFOs. It's not the materialist approach. So it's a way to introduce the audience members that, look, consciousness is primary, number one, and I can get into that later on. And number two, that all of the contact modalities need to be researched and viewed as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness.
Yep. Wonderful. So they can get, people can get in touch with you at info@agreaterreality.com and get more information about the book at www.agreaterreality.com.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's fantastic. And what I'm saying is nothing new. If you talk to any major experiencer, they're like, duh, of course, but what it is that only the major contact experiencers understand this. If you're telling this to any Joe Schmo that's out there, they wouldn't have any understanding what you're doing. Like I said before, you go to an NDE conference, those people, okay, NDEs are out, are in another reality. Yes, I understand that. But everything else, totally clueless. You go to a ufology conference, the only exception are the experiencers, the major experiencers that go to these UFO conferences, which are a major portion of the people. Those people certainly understand what I was talking about. I presented once to a major conference of out-of-body experiencers. It was this group out of Portugal and Brazil, and they had various PhD academics involved. So myself and this neuroscientist, Dr. Bob Davis, we had written this paper that was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. And so the one that we wrote was geared to the OBE audience, okay? And so we made that presentation. And again, those folks were like, what the hell does OBEs have to do with UFOs? What the hell does OBEs have to do with NDEs? What does OBEs have to do with the paranormal? what does OBEs have to do with ghosts and spirits? Okay. So again, they walked around like horses with those blinders on, just like the other realms of research. So one of my goals and objectives is to get these research organizations, to begin to see that, look, this is a little bit more complicated than what you think it is. And we're dealing with a topic that consciousness is primary and that all the contact modalities need to be studied as one. But I'm sure almost everybody here is like, Ray, duh, you're not telling anything new, So it's
well, we all appreciate hearing it, actually. I believe it's really good to hear. So
well, our book really is the first attempt to be able to present this in an academic format and not from a quote unquote from a metaphysical format. And also our book is divided into 2 sections. It's going to have 4 volumes. It's going to be huge. Each of them are going to be like 600 pages each. The first 2 volumes are theoretical in nature. And that's to talk about these things from a theoretical perspective. And that's what I sent you. The next 2 volumes are volumes that are chapters written by experiencers. And most of these experiencers are like my friend there who lives in Orlando, who's had almost everything in the kitchen sink. And so that's what we're having in our articles, is just to demonstrate that, for example, the lead-off article is a medical doctor. She's now retired just last month, Dr. Melinda Greer, and she has had everything and the kitchen sink. And yet she's been working in a children's hospital, saving the lives of little kids, and so, but we've had many, many people like her that have written chapters for our book. So there's going to be 2 volumes that are the experiencer chapters, and they are they're the praxis side. Praxis, one is theory, the other one is the actual events, the details, the raw, the nitty gritty experiences, like what I've just told you of my experiences. So what we're trying to do with our book, we're going to be putting it all in one Kindle version, and we're going to sell it like for $19.99, so everyone can have 2,500 pages of materials, which is going to take them several years to read. But it's all about this new paradigm, and we're going to be making it, for less than 2 6-packs of beers, so like that, everyone can afford it. So that's my objective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing stories and doing all the work you're doing. And thank you, everyone, for being here. So with that, we will sign off. And thank you again, Ray. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.